Yeah, so let's, maybe the first action item is to vote on whether or not we permit Ted to join us remotely. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Nay? Okay, no objections. Ted is joining us remotely. Hi, Ted. Welcome.
Hello.
Okay, so our first order of business is to get the update. How's it going, friends from Koya? Oh, sorry, yes, public comments. I didn't get anything. Did you get anything?
No.
Lee, did you get anything? Okay, and there's nobody waiting to give public comments here. Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
So now, friends from Koya, hi.
Hi. So we've got a couple of things we want to talk about in open session, a little bit of market feedback, which I think will just kind of generally, let's get that out of the way. And then would like to review the high level stats on the report, similar to what we did last time in open session. And that'll take us into my question on scheduling, which I think we can discuss here, which just is a little bit ties to kind of overall timeline and part of why that might be of interest for folks who might be seeing this later. In terms of market feedback, I think the most salient thing that has come up in the last 2 weeks since we met last is a question from a few folks on the posted salary range. So first, I would say many folks very appreciative of the posted salary range. A lot of folks who are saying, you know, I wouldn't send this to a friend, wouldn't refer this for a friend if we didn't have it. So overall, I think just want to emphasize how positive it is to have a posted salary range in the job description. We are getting the question of if there's any wiggle room on that. Is it possible to negotiate beyond? And that does seem to be tied to what we've talked about before, the departure of the former executive director. Folks have named, it seems like it's going to be a lot of work, not just kind of the typical library director work, but also some relationship building, culture building, trust building, maybe repair. And that extra aspect might mean that this role is a bit more challenging than the typical executive director role. And so some folks would be more interested in considering the role if there was wiggle room on the salary, which we had not specifically discussed.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm going to take a minute to look for an email from an HR person, our HR person Billy, who had mentioned the salary range. So I make sure that I'm being, but in the meanwhile, I don't know, Ted, Suzanne, Lee, do you have thoughts?
Yes, I have some thoughts. I'm wondering if we look at salaries for our other executive officers within Oak Park. For instance, the head of the Oak Park Public, Jan Arnold with the Park District, or what. I'd like to look at the salary range there because I think that our citizens might say, all right, the $150,000 salary range for the library director, how does that fit with other library directors around here? And how does it fit within the executives in Oak Park? And Amber, I take your point that I love that some of the people who are asking is you're not asking us just to be a librarian executive director. You're asking us to do all of these other social uh, initiatives.
Okay.
And I will say from our perspective, we can tell people we're not pushing for anything here as the search firm, right? If you tell us that is the range, that is the range, but we want to be sure that we've specifically asked you and we're not just telling people it's the range if you have different thoughts or opinions.
I think it's definitely worth thinking about. Ted, to your comment about like more social initiatives, I think regular library director positions do have a lot of this right now. I don't think that's the area that's different. I think it's the way that Amber put it, which is that the conditions that they're coming into there is, like she said, relationship, culture, and trust building that's needed, and possibly some repair, and that brings it above kind of going into a place that's starting from a more healed place, I guess, or something. So I do think that's a valid point to bring up. What I would be more interested in than the other governing bodies in Oak Park is other libraries, and if that's something that Koya can like search at, like recent library director jobs that have been posted in comparable, you know, like for instance, I know I keep bringing it up, but for instance, Evanston, because there's a comparability,
So,
you know, and having that comparison, I think would be valuable to know, and that's some of the data we do have.
yeah,
right?
so
Can I
Billy
just
sent
finish
this,
my thought though, just in a second,
Yeah.
sorry, because otherwise I'll forget it. So I think that's valuable to know. Particularly if we're comparing with Oak Park Park District, I think that's probably not a good comparison right now.
So Billy and I sent this to everybody on the board on October 1st. So if you wanted, Ted, Suzanne, and I didn't send it to you, Amber or Trish, sorry, but
Did it come from Billy?
no, it came from
you?
me on October 1st. I forwarded the email from Billy, including an attachment in which he talked about the salary, posted salary band, and he talked about what the library market average is right now, given budget, population, and employment size. So taking all of those three things into consideration. So obviously there's been some thought that's gone into how much, and of course he mentioned how much has been set aside for the budget. I don't think that for next year's budget, I don't think that that means that precludes us from changing what that number is, you know, to have it be as a placeholder in the budget. But it is not something that I think even the three of us can decide. Like literally, it would have to be the entire board would have to
Yes,
what the max is. My understanding is that it's not impossible to negotiate or something, but to what extent, that's something that the whole board will have to have a conversation about. And I'm trying to figure out how that can happen because our next meeting isn't until the 17th, which is like a week and a half from now. Well, let me think about that.
Did you get the sense?
While you're thinking about that, Madarima, sorry,
Yeah.
Susan.
Oh, I just was gonna say,
I was just gonna say,
did you get the sense that it might be eliminating some possibilities, that there may be some people who would be interested that would, you know, would not? I think it's important to
not
know.
significantly. No, I think there's one specific person who would not apply if there wasn't wiggle room. Others have come up with a question, but when I've kind of said, well, this is the range, they've said, all right, like I want to continue the conversation. So I don't think it's a huge amount of market feedback that would really lose you any candidates at this stage or at this point. But it is something we've heard from a couple of people. And usually what we do at this point, like Madarima, if you're thinking that the board could talk about it on the 17th, we don't necessarily need to have an exact number. What we could be talking about with candidates is saying, look, the posted range is 140 to 160. The board met on the 17th and they've decided that there is some wiggle room. They're having conversations about how much wiggle room, but like, do you want to continue the conversation knowing that that is happening at the board level? So there is a way to continue the conversation with candidates that we can kind of cultivate, even not having a specific number or change. It's just good to know if the board is in conversation about it or if it is very strictly 140 to 160.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in that we don't know if some of these candidates that we'll talk about in closed section will move forward, but there is someone who's like really interested in the opportunity, but it would be a pay cut. And there's like other candidates they're coming in at the higher end of the range, just to like level set with the board of like that someone coming in at the bottom end of that range is probably unlikely.
Well, one of the things that we did years ago was to provide a hook, which was basically to say to the executive director, um, we will give you a certain amount of money that, that is discretionary for you to use for things that you would want to do. So our uh, director two times ago took that money to take library trip to Cuba, and it was really very interesting because of the Hemingway connection with Oak Park and all. But he took that $3,000 like, and it wasn't given to him as salary, but it was given to him as a bonus that he could use for his library related things that he felt were important. And so, kind of a social justice buck.
Mhm.
That's an interesting point, Ted. We'll have to make sure we bring that up, like in terms of format or what flexibility is or what that can look like in the board meeting. So Ted, if I forget to include that in the update or in the questions, would you mind reminding me, or the search committee during the next board meeting?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you forward that email? It's
Yeah,
not
I'm just
working
doing
to
it.
find it.
Yeah, I'm doing it right now.
I've been trying unsuccessfully. We get a lot of emails, a lot of junk emails.
Yes, we do.
I think in terms of market feedback, that's all we've got. It sounds like there's a little bit more conversation that can happen at the board level. If folks feel okay about it, I'll transition to kind of talking at a high level about the search.
Yes.
Okay. As you know, we officially launched into the market on October 8th with this search. We've sent outreach to over 350 contacts based on our research, the library's own networks, and suggestions during the needs assessment process, and referrals that we've had from conversation with individuals who've said, maybe not for me, but you should reach out to this person, this organization, or post in these locations. At this point, we've received 30 individuals have expressed interest in the position, and 17 of those have officially submitted applications, and Koya is in the process of screening them. As a reminder, screens start with a resume review. Individuals who meet some, if not all, of the qualifications progress to an initial conversation with me where I talk through salary, location, timeline process, and initial questions about their application, trying to get clarity on any areas that might cause question. We report to the committee on those conversations, and folks who seem like they could potentially be a fit do a full screen with Tricia, who talks through professional trajectory, competencies and skill sets, responsibilities and qualifications outlined in the position profile. Based on our previous discussion in closed session, we think there are a few folks that we would recommend for interviews. We have a couple more people to talk about in closed session who we think you might be interested in as well. There's a little bit more to learn, and I'll leave that aspect of the conversation for closed session. But this is where we kind of get into scheduling. After today's conversation, we might be in a place where we've identified 4 to 6 candidates that you would like to meet in a first round interview as a search committee. Now, I don't know that we're going to get there. It's going to depend on the conversation and closed session. But typically when we get to that range, we recommend moving into first round interviews. You will learn about candidates in interviewing, and the feedback that you share with us after interviews is hugely helpful as we continue our outreach and continue to identify folks you might interview. It's a tricky time of year though. And so we're not sure logistically speaking, even if we're at 4 to 6 candidates, if we could squeeze in some interviews before the end of the year. Knowing some of the search committee schedules, it seems like the only days we might be able to do that would be the 13th and the 16th. And then we could discuss kind of the results of those first round interviews on the 20th when we have a scheduled meeting together. I'll stop there. I don't know if we want to talk about this more in closed session or offline, but I did want to name that because if we can't interview on the 13th and 16th or sometime in the next 2 weeks, all of our first round interviews then would probably happen in January. And that just pushes things back probably by about 2 weeks against the original timeline we put together.
And what impact does that have, do you think, and maybe this is a closed session, more specific conversation, but on people who are interested now who may be looking at their positions, et cetera? So, and again,
No one has raised any, yeah, no one has raised any concerns. So in my initial conversations with folks, I've been a bit, I've told them the goal timeline, but I've also pointed out to them that the end of the year is a strange time. And folks have said, oh, yes, of course, obviously, I'm going to be doing that. Like some people are like, I'm going to be out of country. Other people are like, I'm celebrating. So at this moment, nobody has been concerned about whether or not they would interview in December versus January. But depending on how our conversation goes about candidates, I'll circle back to anybody that we do identify that we want to interview and get a really clear sense of if it affects anybody. But at the moment, I don't think it matters to candidates. I think it would probably matter to the board and to staff more. And we just want to, if we don't do any interviews in December, we do them all in January, I think we just need to think about how we update people.
and how much does it matter to you all in your process? Like not having feedback that you're talking about from that process?
I think we're okay because we'll get your feedback in like those calibration sessions. So we had our initial calibration the last time we met. We'll calibrate today and we would calibrate again on the 20th. So every time we calibrate, we are kind of shifting how we're screening and the outreach we're doing. So we would be okay. I think our main concern is how you all feel. Like, are you okay with waiting until January? If you're okay with waiting till January, how can we share that with the board and the staff in a way that makes sense and feels good to folks?
Can I articulate what I think is at stake in what you're saying, and you tell me if I'm understanding this correctly? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems to me that what you're saying is that if we can do the 4 to 6 candidates, we may be able to, depending on how the discussion goes in closed session, we may be able to be in a place where we identify 4 to 6 candidates, and if we have those 4 to 6 candidates now, that we can start interviewing now, that would not preclude people from continuing to apply, because the expectation is that there would be these first round of interviews, but also we would probably continue to have interviews in January. The benefit of doing them now is that candidates who've expressed interest are getting feedback from us, they're moving along in the process, we're getting information. The benefit to waiting is that we would for sure have a better sense of who our candidates are in January. The con of waiting is that we would be 2 weeks, behind in our scheduled process. Do I understand that?
Exactly right.
I know we both look at Lee.
I don't know that 2 weeks, if there's a chance that we're not freaking people out over the holidays, that if there's a chance that we just commit to having interviews in January, my personal opinion is that the 2 week addition is not that large of a disruption, especially if that means that we've feel more confident in the 4 to 6 candidates that we have at that point. Like, I think that what I've heard Lee say before in representing the staff and her own opinion, but please contradict me if I'm wrong, is that most staff members are okay waiting for a little bit if it means that who you get is we're like confident and excited
Yes.
about.
Yeah, I mean, what, people want it to be timely, but they don't want it to be rushed. We want to make sure that we get the candidate that we need, and so staff isn't really, pushing for, well, let's hurry up and get this done. Like, they'd rather we go about this thoughtfully and bring in candidates who can do what we need an executive director to do. I mean, my schedule, I can make that work. I think on the 13th, I've got a prior commitment in the afternoon that I can't schedule, but I'm open in the morning. Like, it's kind of up to you guys what your schedule is, but if we wanted to do it in December, like, we could make that happen.
So how, as co-interim, how do you feel about, and particularly being on the committee and everything, like
Yeah.
about the delay versus the,
I'm committed to getting us somebody great, so I don't feel like anxious that, we have to rush things. Like, I'm okay with the process taking as long as it needs to take.
Great. I think the one thing that I could see is that there could be value to us and to Koya and to applicants, just to have the conversation start, for people who are interested now that I could see, and especially given that you were saying that then you would still be receiving, it wouldn't be, that it's not like a process where we're selecting these people that then go to these people, that then go to these people, that there's new people coming in. Like, given that, that's the one thing I personally could see where reviewing what we had, like having conversations, there could be some value. So, yeah, I think, maybe we should.
Can I ask Suzanne, like, as you were speaking, I was just wondering if there's a way in which, do we think as a board and as a search committee that we would be able to, like, hold multiple, like, do a fair comparison if the conversations are spread out? Do you know what I mean? Like, if we have some now and then we have some a month later, I want to make sure that we're being fair to all candidates. So I really don't know what the answer to that is.
Makes a lot of sense, yeah.
And also, of course, the two things, from the candidate's perspective, is it worse to wait after you've interviewed or before you've interviewed? Like, is it, I don't want the fact that we're waiting after people have interviewed to signal to them that we were unhappy with their interview. Do you know what I mean? Or necessarily so.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that is something we manage on. Oh, go ahead, Amber.
No, I was gonna say probably exactly what you're about to say.
Yeah, like that is something we manage on our end with the candidates, just like a expectation setting. But you do have some good foresight here, which is the problem we usually have is that clients can't remember their first, like the interviews they had in their first, like early, and it's hard to compare. So that does come up, I would say, often with clients. Anything to add, Amber?
Yeah, I guess I would say the one thing, if we felt a crunch on time, it can be useful to schedule. If we felt the crunch on time in this instance, I would say maybe we do some in December. And part of what makes comparison between any December and January a little bit easier is the structure we would give you to take notes, to track your the feedback, your scores on candidates, all of those things. If we wait and do all interviews in January, that piece is much, much easier. And one thing we can do to kind of alleviate any anxiety candidates might feel is to start telling people that we know we want to interview, that we want to interview them. So like at least then right? Like if we meet today, if we meet on the 20th and we say we know we want to interview these people, if we can turn around and say to them, look, you're invited to an interview, it's happening, and it's going to be like this week in January, then people can kind of just sit back and be like, okay, like I know they want to know more about me. I know I'm going to get an interview. Like they don't have that anxiety in the interim.
So based on that, and the fact that you said if we had a time crunch, then we would do it now, I think it probably does make sense to wait till January. Because I don't, like, any reason that I would have for doing it would be just to facilitate our process here. Not necessarily for the time crunch, because I think we don't want to rush.
Yeah.
We want to do this right and thoughtfully.
I just,
That's my opinion.
no, I think that that's fair. I think that I have this, I have, I, for my job as a professor, I understand that students always remember the last thing we read the best, you know, so I want to make sure that like the fact that candidates have been excited and reached out doesn't actually end up working again, you know, working against them. And I'm sure the two of you would help manage our side of this, but if we can make that easier for all of us by having them all around the same time, my opinion, I think with Suzanne, is that we wait until January. What do you think, Lee?
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's fine.
And I concur with that. I think that to Trisha's point, it would be hard for us to remember what candidates in December said when we're talking to candidates in January.
Good.
Okay. This might be something then that we could talk about on the 20th, but we should think about kind of getting ahead on the scheduling. So maybe that's something we talk about on the 20th, but being able to have those dates and times held in January on your calendars as the search committee will be really helpful in kind of being able to tell folks like, look, we do want to interview you. Here are the dates. Like, let's talk scheduling over the holidays so they know they've got something coming.
And I'm very glad to hear from Lay that the staff, I mean, is willing to be patient.
Yes.
And we had planned to do a staff update before the end of the year. We could do an all staff open hour, office hour again, if folks think that would be helpful, where we could explain kind of, look, we're going to do all first round interviews in January. This is where we're at. We're, not share about candidates, but certainly say we've got some candidates we're excited about, that kind of thing. Or we could do an email, or we could do both. Offer the office hours, see who comes, follow up with an email if there aren't folks who do attend. Does that still feel right for a staff community update before the end of the new year, or
I
before
think
the end
that
of the
would,
year?
yeah, I think that would work well. And, I think the open hours would be nice. Now that we're a little bit further in the process, I think staff, if they have any questions or feedback, would really welcome that opportunity. So yeah, if we can get that on the books, if you want to do open hours and then maybe like an email talking about that and just giving a little overview, we can certainly do that.
Can I say to the first point, Amber, about getting like talking on December 20th about the dates for the January dates, like getting those on our schedule. So I would say that that is one thing that we don't have to like. The Open Meetings Act doesn't like cover just scheduling of those things. So that's something that we could
Okay,
do offline via email. And I think that that might even be better for everyone to be able to check their calendars and
perfect.
everything and not take up the meeting time, which we always run out of. So,
Okay. Yeah, so after this meeting, then what I'll do is I'll send the committee a doodle poll to start scheduling in January. And I'll propose some time that Trish and I are available for staff open hours, and then we can get that on the books as well. And I'll put some information in there about the statistics, which I shared already in open session, which would go into the staff update. So you can kind of see what that email would look like to staff.
That's great.
I have a question about community outreach and update. We had sort of talked about what that might look like, and I was wondering if we could. And we had said that if that we wanted to do it, I think at this stage before before we're interviewing candidates, but after like the job position is out. So I think we're at that stage now. So do you? We didn't, I didn't send this to you as an agenda item, so it's okay if you don't, but do you have any thoughts about what that might look like?
We had discussed potentially, I think this committee, when I say we had discussed a Google form available online where folks could say, you should be reaching out to these organizations or these folks, or here are the questions that I would want to know you were asking an incoming executive director. If the Google form sounds like a good option, we could definitely do that. I think beyond that, maybe the next kind of easiest like forum that kind of leverages your existing communication with community members. And I'm saying this out of turn, so Trisha, please stop me if you don't feel this way. But you could always attend an open session of the full board meeting, not just an open session of
The
this
search.
meeting, and share there.
Yeah, I was thinking, or I mean, there's a number of ways. I think that what we talked about was a Google form, and I don't know if you have like a listserv that can go out actually with with an update on the search to people in the community, and if they want to weigh in, Google form, and we can put our contact information too. I think we also talked about like, do we invite community to office hours
Yeah, that's
type
the one
thing?
that I remembered was the office, maybe having
Yeah.
an office hour.
Mhm.
Um, I am sort of looking around the search committee to see like what you all think. I think a combo of those two things is, you
I think
know,
an update going through our regular communication channels. I'm gonna have to like kind of talk to communication and figure out what the best kind of subset, if we're gonna do a subset, or if it's the full, you know, or through one of the regular emails that goes out, that also includes a link to a Google form. I really think getting something out asking sooner rather than later about you should reach out to this folks. If you think that, like, if that's in your experience, you've gotten any like traction from community with job searches, I guess it's a bit of a different sort of search, but there may be people out there who know people, and it would be really nice to get that kind of referral process going soon. And I like the here's what I want to know framing on the questions, so that lets us know what people are interested in the community. Yeah, that feels like a nice way to do it. I'm a little, the open office hours, I don't know how productive they will be, but you know, that's up to you all.
I mean,
But I do
I
like
don't think I
the,
heard that. You don't know how productive will be. Is
yeah,
that?
yeah. In terms of forward looking instead of backward looking.
I see. I see. I see. Okay.
But you know, if you want to, um, yeah, if you think there would be value in that, then that's certainly an option. But I do think the specificity of like, here's an update of where we are, and do you know people that we should, you know, make sure get this position profile, and then you know, just a clear, here's what I want to know about our next executive director, kind of, I like that framing.
I guess I think that there should be, even if it is painful to hear and maybe not like doesn't lead to specific action items moving forward, but I do think like checking in with the community about this position, since there was, you know, like it wasn't just an internal issue, like it was
Right.
deeply public, um and I think that seems appropriate. And again, yeah, and again, we're elected board members, and
Of course,
you know,
I was just wondering if, like, it should be us versus Koya. You know, and what's the best path or route for that? And if
maybe,
it,
yeah, so maybe if Koya has because you're talking to many more candidates than we are as a search committee, or potential candidates or people who are interested. So I think that it makes a lot of sense for you to hear first, but maybe between somebody on the search committee could join you remotely for the open hour, depending on where it is, when it is, or something, or we could just also be there, you know, as a way to increase our accountability for that.
What if we send out an email at the end of like this month with an update on the search, and then invite people to a 1 hour office hours mid-January at 6 p.m. and on Zoom, and we'll see if people join. But like, I think it's good to give that option out there.
I agree.
I like that.
As long as it's before, I think as long as it's before we're actually interviewing, even our first round interviewing candidates, I think if we can do, I think that if we're going to do it, to make sure that we are showing that we really are seriously, interested
Yeah.
in what the community has to say, I think it would need to come before we start interviewing.
And we are, definitely interested in what the community has to say. I just wasn't sure in terms of impact for Koya doing the actual job, like actually doing the search, if it would be looking enough, but,
I think it's more about giving the community different options of maybe people just reading the update enough. Maybe they want to fill out a Google form, or maybe that's just easier for them to show up in person. Giving those three options, I think is just, and the hour is not going to limit us or in any way.
okay.
And we can send that email with the Google update, the Google form in December before the holidays. So there's we're getting input sooner rather than later as well. And then we'll make sure to schedule an office hour before the interviews begin.
I think
Sounds
that
like a plan.
Yeah, sounds really good.
You all are so great. So glad we have you on board.
Thank you. I think that is everything that we can talk about in open session. I think the next step is talking about some specific applicants. So I think everything else kind of left on our agenda is closed session material.
Okay, are there any questions before we move into closed session? I guess I have a request, which is that, again, it's going to be like a week and a half before the full board meets. So if there's any chance, I know this is extra work, so you can say no, but if there's any chance of getting like an update of, that is as recent as up to date as possible before the board meeting. So the board meeting is December 17th. That would be great. So
Yeah, we can do that. That's easy.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
immediately following this meeting, we'll send an email that has some information for getting the search committee scheduled in January, a draft of what might go out to community members, the staff information, and maybe some information that would go out in that email to community. And then on the 16th, we will send the search committee specifically an update that can be shared with the board on the 17th.
Perfect. That would be so useful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ted, were you saying something?
soon.
I'm sorry, Ted, did you say something? I think I was
See
talking.
you soon. See you soon.
See you soon, right. So then is there a motion to
So moved. To go into
closed session? I think Suzanne's moved. Is there a second? I'll second since Ted's left. And we'll see everybody in closed session. Okay.
Apologies.
Okay, so we have wrapped our work in closed session. I think this brings us to the end of the agenda for the search committee meeting for today. So, given that, I declare us adjourned. Thanks, everyone.